Uncle Tim's. It's all good.
Hey, welcome to Uncle Tim's Farm. I'm Uncle Tim, and today I'm continuing to work on my mobile hydraulic boom crane that's going to be used for on-farm processing of livestock. Right here I'm welding together these plates so that I can drill holes through them, and the holes will be in the exact same spot on both plates. So I'm just tacking the plates together, and these are going to be the pivot points that attach to the boom. So these two plates right here are the pivot point that are going to go on the base. Now I'm going to go ahead and lay out where I want these holes to be, and you can see I have some templates that I had mocked up so that I would have an idea of how things were going to work. But I'll go ahead and get these holes laid out and marked, and then go ahead and drill them. So this is going to be my first time using this mag drill. So it's going to take me a little bit to figure out exactly what kind of pressure and all that, how it all works. But I eventually get it figured out, and it works pretty good. The only thing I don't care for is it has a variable speed, but that variable speed, basically all it does is reduce the power that it sends to the motor. So if you slow it down too much, then it bogs down once you get to drilling. This is also my first time using an annular cutter, so I'm getting used to figuring that out as well. The nice thing is it has a pilot pin right there in the center so you can line up your hole, and then that pilot pin also helps the cutting fluid to flow down to the surface, and it's spring loaded so it pushes out the core when you're finished cutting the hole. Right here I'm opening up the little valve to let the cutting fluid flow, and then I'm going to add a little bit of extra cutting fluid to the surface here to get started. I wasn't sure exactly how that cutting fluid was going to flow down, but I later found out that when you push down on that pilot pin, then the cutting fluid flows down through there. Right here is where I realized that these annular cutters are really loud, so I went and got some earmuffs. The other thing I discovered when doing this, after I did this first one, is that when you're cutting through 2 plates like this, you should go ahead and stop once you've made it through the first plate, eject that core, and then go ahead and do the second plate. I didn't do that, and so it was struggling to get through that second plate because of having that other core inside there. So it was a good thing I stopped and cleaned that off, because it was then that I noticed my table almost had fallen over. I forgot to lock it out, but thankfully it didn't fall. That sure makes a nice clean cut through there. It worked good once I figured out what I was doing. Start off with, I was putting too much torque on it. Once I was having a little bit of trouble with the cutting fluid flowing, and I think part of that is I didn't thin it down enough with the water. It was a water-based cutting fluid, and like I said, I didn't get enough water in there, I think, so it was having a hard time flowing, but I eventually got it to where it was flowing pretty good. So you can see once I got that first core out of there, this thing started cutting through this like butter. So it did make a big difference getting that other core out of the way. There's a little bit of a burr on the bottom side of that hole, so I went ahead and got the drill back up there and finished cleaning it out. Now that I have the holes cut through these pieces, I can go ahead and grind off the little tack welds, and also just make sure that they're nice and smooth, and then take them apart and then mount them to the tubing or to the boom where they belong. I'm just trying to make sure that these edges are nice and symmetrical with each other. I wanted to real quick show you these templates that I made up out of foam board. Created these so that I could mock up things, get an idea of how things were going to fit together, how the hinges would work, how much clearance I was going to need. So this right here, the big plate, and there's going to be a hole right in here, and that's where the hinge pin is going to go, and then this plate will weld to the boom. So this represents the boom. So then this whole piece is what's going to hinge and lift the boom. And then this here is the base plate, and yeah, that's the base plate. And this plate will weld to the side of it like this, and then you can see there'll be a hole right there, and that's where the hinge will be on the base plate. Anyhow, and then what I did was I took these two templates, this one here and this one, I took them to my steel supplier and had them cut 4 pieces, so 2 of each one of these pieces from a 3/8 inch plate, and they use their laser cutter, so they have really nice smooth edges, and they're both exactly the same. And then I'll go ahead and tack weld them together, tack weld 2 of these together, match them up exactly on the edge, tack them together, and then drill the hole in there. It's a 2 1/4 inch hole, and then I'll do the same for these, tack them together to where they're matched, drill the 2 1/4 inch hole through them. And then I have some tubing, it's the DOM tubing, so there's no seam inside, and it will weld into those holes. And then I have 1.5 inch 4140 round stock that will serve as the hinge that goes inside that tubing. You'll see all of that later, but I just want to show you real quick how I was able to get my steel, figure out how things were going to work, and then get my steel cut out like I wanted it. Just use this cheap foam board, less than $1 a sheet, and just kind of drew things up how I thought they should go, and then cut them out with a razor blade. So this is the tubing that I'm going to use to be part of the pivot point. This is called DOM tubing, so that it's drawn over mandrel, so there's no seam inside, so it's smooth inside, so it'll work good for this purpose. And then also, this is my new Evolution cutoff saw that I'm using, and this thing is amazing for cutting metal. One thing I learned though is that it throws some pretty good chips, and that's why I'm wearing the leather apron, and then why I also wear goggles and a face mask and the long gloves. It's nice. Another great tool that I discovered during this build are these electromagnets. These things are great. So much simpler to use than the other magnet, just the regular magnets. Those are kind of a pain to position. With these electromagnets, you can get them in position, turn them on, and they hold that one there, the yellow one, has a 90-pound hold. The other ones the little blue ones are not quite as strong, but these things are great. And then when you're done using them, you just turn the switch off and move them, and there's no fighting with them. Man, I just love those things. So this is the pivot point that's going to be welded to the end of the boom, and you'll see that later on in the video, or actually in a later video. But then I will also be putting a grease zerk in that, a grease fitting, and that's where the pivot point's going to be, and there'll be a big steel rod that goes through there and attaches down through the pivot point attaches through that to the pivot point on the base. I'm making sure that this is perfectly square because of what it's going to be used for. It would be no good to have a crooked pivot point on your boom. That could cause all kinds of havoc. So it definitely has to be perfectly square. So I'm getting ready to weld, and you'll notice that I put on long sleeves, and that's because of the flash burn that you can get from welding. That is just as bad or worse than a sunburn. So you definitely want to have your skin covered. You don't want any exposed skin while you're welding. I'm leaving those magnets in place as much as possible while I'm welding this to help hold it square. Here I'm using a square that I've cut the corner off of so that it can get in there where the welds are. A regular square wouldn't be able to get into that corner like that with those welds on there. So, like I said, I cut off the corner of aluminum square and it works really good for this. A good ground connection always helps the weld go better. I just wanted to make sure this was going to fit in place before I went ahead and finished welding it, and sure enough, it fits just right. Alright, that's going to wrap up this video. I'm just finishing this weld here. Be sure to come back for the next video where I'm going to start assembling the base that's going to go on the trailer, and I'll also get this pivot point attached to the end of the boom. So thanks for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye.